600 was launched in April of 1992, taking over from the Amiga 500 Plus, which had only been announced 6 months prior. It was otherwise an identical machine, still containing 1MB of chip memory and a Motorola 68000. In many respects, it was too little too late, and was in fact the result of Commodore mismanagement, as they had initially said that they were going to launch an Amiga 300 with a much more cut down specification from the Amiga 500. However, due to management screw-ups, the Amiga 600 was the result. Many at the time felt it was too little too late. However, it was a useful machine, including an IDE expansion inside for hard drives and a PCMCIA slot on the side. Hey everybody, this is my first video, so this is kind of exciting and also nerve-wracking at the same time. I'm Vicky, Pixel Vixen, and this video is going to be the first in two parts, I think, about restoring a Commodore Amiga 600. This machine I bought in 1993, I think, and it's I'd completely forgotten that I even had this. So about 10 years ago, when my parents had moved, they asked me to check out some of the stuff that had been stored up in their previous house's attic, and I said sure, I can check it all out. And I had been living away at university by then. In fact, actually I'd finished university because this was around about 2006, so I'd been living away from home for about 4 years by then. So to actually find my working Amiga 600 was quite a surprise at the time. And back in the day, my first Amiga was an Amiga 500, and then eventually got the 600, which in hindsight wasn't actually all that much different to owning the Amiga 500 inside of it. But as time went by, I ended up with some very high-end Amigas by the late 90s, including an Amiga 4000 with an 060 and an Amiga 1200 with a PowerPC processor. But time moved on, and it was time for me to get with the program, and I bought a PC, and the rest of this is history. So most of my Amiga stuff just all went around about 1999, 2000 or so. But recently I have been thinking about putting these older machines back to use again, and this is pretty much the perfect machine for that, because for myself, I'm not actually all that interested in sort of like these modern Amigas with PowerPC processors, or some of the other systems that may be out there, such as MorphOS. They're all perfectly valid things in their own right, but my interest lies in these classic machines which have been pretty much unadulterated from how they came from the factory, and just enjoy them for what they are, really. And because my interest spans systems and consoles beyond just the Amiga, it's kind of nice actually to go back to my roots with these things, with a system where my computing history started. This, or the Amiga, wasn't actually my first computer. That was actually a Commodore 64. So, but it was always the Amiga that was the one that I just loved the most. So what I'm going to be doing in this two-part series is I'm going to be giving this Amiga 600 a good clean, because it really needs it. It's been sat in my loft now for the past 10 or more years, collecting dust and that, but the really great thing is that it still works. The eagle eyed amongst you will notice that there's actually no ports at the back of the 600, and the reason for that is that I've actually sent off the motherboard to be restored at Amiga Kit in Cardiff, Wales, and hopefully any day now it'll be back from having the capacitors replaced, the floppy drive serviced, and the intention is to basically put a compact flash hard disk inside of here, so that I'm not going to be using a 2.5-inch IGE hard disk in here, and I've got an extra 1 megabyte of chip memory to go in the trapdoor slot. But beyond that, I don't actually anticipate changing much about this Amiga 600. I'm going to probably leave it on Kickstart 2.05, which is what this machine came with, and yeah, just enjoy it for what it is. I think as I've got older, I've got less interested in fiddling with computers, and I just prefer them to switch on and work. And so the idea of putting the 68020 in here or anything like that, whilst impressive and I'm sure very reliable, I just want to enjoy this for what it is, which is basically a 68,000 based machine. The chipset inside of this one is very similar to what the original designers of the Amiga produced. It's a slightly enhanced version called ECS, enhanced chipset, but in reality it didn't actually provide that much over the OCS Amigas, the original chipset Amigas. So I just want to keep this very very standard, purely because my interest lays with perhaps playing some of the older classic games, Rainbow Islands, New Zealand Story, Turrican 2, those kinds of things, and but also Blitz Basic, which I loved coding on. It's what I really properly learnt to code on, and also things like Deluxe Paint Free, which I spent hours in. So my aim actually is with this machine is to get back into doing some music, which is going to be a learning experience for me because I'm not the most natural musician, although I love music, and to get back to doing some classic pixel art, and hopefully I'm going to go on to produce a really decent JRPG, action RPG for the Amiga, which was something that it really sorely lacked over many of its contemporaries, like particularly the SNES and also a little bit earlier the NES. So it's just fun really to invest some time in doing those things. I've also got here some of the magazines which from back in the day, which these are a few that I've had to repurchase actually, because whilst I had plenty of issues of CU Amiga and Amiga formats, including this very one when I was younger, I got rid of an absolute shed load of magazines 20 odd years ago, and I only actually really kept a couple of them. So in here we've got some of the original articles all about sort of the Amiga 500 being discontinued, what the launch of the Amiga 600 meant and so forth, so we'll be having a look at that. And just looking at actually some of the coverage, you know, they were really excited about the fact that this machine came with what they called a credit card slot. We may now know that as a PCM CIA slot, which was really hot technology back in 1992. In fact, the A600 included a PCM CIA port before the standard was even agreed, so it was that cutting edge in that regard, but the rest of it was actually very, very vanilla. It was not much different from actually an Amiga 500 with 1 megabyte of chip memory. There's no overall difference. The main advantages that it had was the fact that you could put a hard disk inside of it really easily, and in fact some of them actually came from the factory with a 20 megabyte hard disk. The other thing was that it had a TV modulator built in, which these days not at all important, but back in the early 90s most people were actually using their consoles and there's computers like the Atari ST and the Amiga and so forth using RF connections to their television sets, so those were quite nice little aspects. But other than that, this was a pretty basic Amiga. It was certainly no Amiga 3000, that's for sure. Of course, the other thing is that only 6 months after the Amiga 600 came out, the A1200 was released, which was it was a much better machine. It was the Amiga that really probably should have come out 2 years before it actually did, in late 1990. If it's a change, perhaps the fortunes of Commodore and indeed the Amiga. We all know how that ended up, with Commodore going bankrupt in 1994. But I think it's just going to be fun to enjoy the Amiga 600 for what it is. So the first step is have a little look over the machine and also get on with actually cleaning it up. So enjoy! So let's take a look through an Amiga format that announced the Amiga 600 to most of the UK population. This was from June 1992, so it's just a couple of months after the A600's announcement. There was also the news that the Amiga 500 Plus, which was the minor upgrade to the A500, was dead as well. A lot of people were pretty upset about this. After all, the Amiga 500 was incredibly popular, and many peripherals depended on the Amiga 500's hardware setup to function. So this was quite a big change. However, many recognised that the Amiga 500 was well past its sell-by date, but given that the Amiga 600 wasn't actually much of an upgrade, it remains to be seen actually really whether it was the Amiga that the UK needed. I think it was far too little too late. It's a beautiful machine and I really do love my Amiga 600. Another funny thing is that you'll find in this particular issue of Amiga Format, they had unfortunately left a rather brazen byline in for a cover disc, paint application day for children. I'm not entirely sure whether the Amiga 600 was the computer I'd always dreamt about, although the Amiga was pretty much a dream machine, at least it was for me, back in 1992, so perhaps it was. And also, for a change, there was actually some advertising.
Right now, you could instantly win one of 200 Commodore Amigas with scrubby curly quavers. Or push over a new computer game starring me and my pal, Giant. There are 10,000 to be won. Details on every packing. Watch out, computers have got curly.
Well, of course, when I say advertising, it was a promotion tied up with Smith's Crisps and their Quavers brand. But hey, seeing the Amiga on television was quite a good thing. And also, it was very widely reported that the Amiga 600 was originally meant to be the A300, so it was no real secret, and everybody understood very clearly that it was just marketing, and also the fact that Bill Sidness had screwed up the engineering department at Commodore, and he was promptly sacked actually after the Amiga 600's launch because it actually cost more to produce than the Amiga 500 it was meant to replace. Of course, only 6 months after the Amiga 600 was launched, the Amiga 1200 was released. This quick succession of entry-level machines did probably more harm than good, confused the market, fragmented the audience. The Amiga 1200 really was a much better machine. It was the upgrade the Amiga really needed a couple of years before. So, without much further ado, it's about time that we gave this well-loved but rather grubby Amiga 600 a bit of TLC and a good scrub. Disassembling the Amiga 600 is fairly straightforward. It only has a few screws on the bottom. I always lay a towel down before doing any work like this, just so that the main plastics don't get scuffed and scraped. And you'll find that there are 3 screws at the very front of the underside of the machine, one of which may still be hidden underneath a warranty sticker in the middle, but on my particular Amiga 600 this has been opened up quite a few times in its life, so it's revealed. You'll also find that there is 1 screw just on the right hand side of the machine, and that's pretty much it. I think I may have said there's 5, looks like there's actually only 4 screws. Just be very careful of the clips at the back of the case. They're very fragile, and if you snap these you'll find that the case will never snap shut properly again. The next step is to remove the keyboard, and the easiest way to do this is just slightly flex the upper case outwards and the keyboard will just pop out. Just be careful not to tug the LED power lights and disk activity light cable, because the solder joints might be quite fragile. These are quite old computers now. I'm just going to use some toothbrushes for the hard to get areas, bicarbonate of soda for gentle scrubbing action, some warm water, and just a bit of time, patience and scrubbing power. My first step for these kinds of projects is to give the whole case a good rinse under just very slightly warm water, and just using no detergents or anything like that. Just giving particular focus to areas which pick up all the dirty marks, particularly around the floppy drive where years of fingers inserting discs have taken a toll on the casing, and just being careful to support the casing because it can be quite fragile because it's not particularly thick. And then I will go in with the toothbrush just to really tackle those hard to get areas in the vents where all manner of crud and dust and who knows what, ice poles and other sorts of things have affected the integrity of the case. And also continue this process for the bottom of the case, just with fresh, very slightly warm water and just using a bit of elbow grease really. There's nothing more to it really. Just make sure you support those plastics because they could be quite brittle if they've not been protected from the sunlight and so forth over the years. Also give the ports at the back a good scrub. Again, this is where people have plugged in their external peripherals, TV cables, power supplies, so this is important to give this a bit of TLC as well. Now we're all done with that, I move on to the bicarbonate of soda stage, just sprinkling some of the bicarb straight out of the pot and then just using again very tepid water, just scrubbing that into the casework and just using the gentle cleaning action of bicarb to clean out the stubborn dirt. Again, I just work this with a toothbrush. This is great for getting into those areas and just generally giving a little bit of a sparkle. I'm sure you'll agree that this Amiga is taking on something of a slightly, shall we say, Colombian look at the moment. Anyway, this is definitely bicarb soda. So once that's all done, the case is fully rinsed off again under just very tepid water, just making sure that any of the bicarb that is still in the casework is rinsed through. Once that's all done, I let the case work dry out, and I think it's probably about time that after all that hard scrubbing that we have a bit of a reward and a good brew. Once tea is made, I get on with just some gentle cleaning of the keyboard. I'm not actually going to take this fully apart. These Amiga 600 keyboards can be quite fragile and I don't actually have the right tool for removing the keycaps, so just using a different toothbrush, nice dry toothbrush, just getting as much of the dust and muck out as possible. Job's a good one. So I hope you can join me for part 2 of restoring this Amiga 600, where I'll be fitting the motherboard and various upgrades back into it and getting it switched on, working and demonstrating some of that awesome 1992 power. So I hope you've enjoyed my first video. See you soon. Bye!